All right, now let's talk about the humanism pieces. I'm not going to belabor what humanism is. I've talked about that in an overview previous video, and you can go online and look up all sorts of definitions of humanism and things like that. But the basic things is really what we're talking about. We're not talking about any particular branch of humanism. We're talking about the humanist concept, the broad-based concepts that we're going forward with. But really, where does all this come from? While it might sound like a relatively new thing or a newer thing, it actually, you could really state that humanism predates Christianity. If you go back to the early Greeks, that's where the whole philosophies and the early parts of this religion really come from. And probably, if you consider who might embody that, we could look to Socrates. Socrates, at a time when everybody around was saying, you know, I have the truth, I have the truth, I have the truth, different religions and things like that, Socrates stood alone and he said, I don't have the truth, but I know how to get it. And he employed the process of questioning. And he encouraged everybody to question things, examine and cross-examine. And that's really what we get from it. Socrates wasn't really about saying this is the truth. He's saying this is the way to find the truth. And that's really perhaps what I consider at least the key part of humanism and going forward. Now, we all heard of Socrates and many of the Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle and all of that. So what happened? Well, if we fast forward a little bit until about the 2nd century, we have Christianity. And Christianity had grown at this point from a cult into a pretty politically good religion. And Christianity was really flexing its muscles, more or less, and trying to put down what they considered the pagan religions and push itself forward. You have the evangelists who, in their Gospels, have each written some version of that very Christian saying, if you're not with us, you're against us. That was the theme going forward with the early Christians of this time. And you have Tertullian, a writer, early Christian there, who was picking up really that same theme. And he was basically saying, we despise the Greeks and all their philosophy. They are the forefathers of the heretics. Now, of course, heresy is becoming a big issue now with the early Christians. And so he's pushing those all away, saying we shouldn't listen to those. His famous statement is, what has Athens got to do with Jerusalem? And what he's trying to say is that through Jerusalem, through the church, we have all the writings, we have all the history, and we have everything that we need. We shouldn't pay attention to anything else. That's meaningless, that's heretical, that's pagan, and it's terrible stuff. It's really what he was talking about. And so we had all this stomping going on, which was really did drive out, as the Christian religion grew, it drove out a lot of the Socratic thinking. Perhaps an interesting quirk with Tertullian, though, is that he was famous for coming up with the Christian Trinity. But basically, for as much as he stomped and said no against the Greeks, the Greek thinkers, he basically snitched that from Plato, Plato's tripartite soul. And you can dig into that a little more if you're interested in that, but it's sort of an interesting piece. It proves, though, that you're always going to be influenced by your upbringing. He was brought up as an attorney, a lawyer, in Africa, and was heavily influenced, of course, by the Greek learning and stuff. And as much as he converted to Christianity and got behind it and all of that and said, all this Greek stuff is nonsense, he was clearly very much influenced by it, and he included that piece in with the Christian piece too. So where are we with humanism today? Well, we have a lot of humanistic religions out there, or somewhere, calling them religions, but organizations, whatever. You can again go on the internet and you could search for tons of them. And you see them all over the place, antagonistically in schools and all of that. What's wrong with all of this? They certainly embrace many or all of the humanistic concepts that I'm talking about, which are great and we're going forward with. What I don't feel fits, though, is that they are institutional, hierarchal organizations, and they've gone away from the individual, what the individual is all about. And they're talking about the organization. And again, go online, go to the American Humanist Association. You will see a big, huge, gloppy, page-long manifesto. What do we need a manifesto for if we're not going to battle? And you read it, and you read about the hierarchy of the organization, how you can get involved by sending money, how they're lobbying and going to schools, and what they're doing, and probably what many of these other organizations are doing, is promoting humanism as opposed to humanity. I'm not interested in proposing humanism. That's just another one of the religions, of the many religions out there, all equal in my mind. No problem. Nothing against any of them. But I'm going back to the basics, humanity, the individual. And that's what we're really all about with existential humanism.